3 years ago, I had the urge to buy a lemon tree, and that quickly turned into 15 other citrus trees. And now we're getting some of these. One of the fruit trees that everybody seems to want to grow is citrus, and it also tends to be one of the ones that gives people the most trouble. So there's many rules and guidelines that you hear about. They say don't water too much, don't water too little, don't over fertilize, citrus like wet feet, or citrus don't like wet feet. You have to let it dry out completely. You need lots of rich organic soil. There's just a lot of things to think about. And after growing them for 3 years, I'm here to give my advice on how I think is the easiest way to grow them in containers. My name's Lucas, this is Grows Gone Wild, where I teach you how to grow how to grow fruit in pots. So it's a lot to digest. And I found that there's only one key that you really need to utilize, and that's your soil. What I mean when I say the key is your soil, it's not about having an organic, rich, expensive type of soil. It's about having a mineral-based soil. So what I use is a soil called Top Pot, and it's made out of peat moss, perlite, pumice, sand, and charcoal. But basically the only thing that's organic or has organic material in there is the peat moss. The rest is just minerals. I make my own. If it's not very available around the States, and definitely not outside of the States, you can buy like Pro Mix HB, which is just peat moss and perlite, or Sunshine Mix number 4, and then you can add some pumice and sand. So I recommend usually like a third peat moss, a third pumice, and then you can mix perlite and sand based on what your needs are. So if you need something heavier that won't blow over, then it's more sand. If you want something lighter, then you add more perlite. So if you want to know what a mineral-based soil looks like, you just go in your yard and dig up some of the dirt in the backyard, and you'll see it's made of sand, silt, and clay, and those are just minerals. Those are perfectly fine for growing most plants. But the problem with it in pots is it's going to be ridiculously heavy, which is the benefit of using Gary's mix, the Top Pot, is that you can actually move this around because it's going to be like 500 pounds in like a 15-gallon pot. And with native soil, you have issues with compaction. With Top Pot, you have the pumice that gives it more structure, that opens it up and allows aeration and the roots to move around. That's one of the key components you need to think about when growing in containers. Just to note, coco coir and peat moss, they're not interchangeable. They are very different. They do the same thing. They do water retention, but one is a shredded up coconut that's heavily processed, and one is peat moss that's pulled out of the ground. But coco coir will break down faster. You get a lot more lifetime with your peat moss, and it won't go anaerobic. The reasons why we would use a mineral-based soil is because if you use something organic, that stuff eventually is going to break down and go anaerobic and cause the root rot in your plants. So if you're growing citrus with the mineral-based soil, you don't need to worry about overwatering or waterlogging your plants. Peat moss doesn't decompose as fast as wood or other forest products, so you get about 5 years before it disappears, and it doesn't go anaerobic. Another popular soil mix is 511, and it's 5 parts reptile bark, 1 part compost, and 1 part number 3 perlite. And a lot of people have success with that, but I just don't use it, to be honest with you. They do 511 and 512, which is different ratios of the soil mix. I have no experience with it because I just use Top Pot. But if that works for you, all that really matters at the end of the day is your trees are thriving. If you can make it happen with one soil, that's great. I did it with this soil and with this method, and I found it to be the easiest because it's very hands-off. So step 1 is to get some clean soil. So first thing you do is you go get your citrus tree from the nursery. You get any size, whatever you feel comfortable with, and then take it out of the pot and blast that soil off. So I've done this with all my trees. None have died, and none have really suffered from it. I haven't even had leaf drop. So what I do is I blow off all the dirt, and then I will just repot it back into some mineral-based soil and leave it in the shade for a couple weeks. You want it to get a little bit of sun, but you don't want it to get full sun because it might burn itself, because the roots still need to acclimate to the new pot. So I do like to pack in the soil at this point, because that stops the tree from moving around or shaking around. You don't need to stake at that point because it'll just stand by itself. So during time of season, if you're doing it in the winter or spring, there's no problem just leaving that. As long as you don't get any frost or any significant cold, you can just leave it out. In the summer, you just, like I said, you want to leave it in the shade for about at least 2 weeks. For fertilization, whenever I start a new tree, I'll add Osmocote Plus, and then that'll be good for about 5 or 6 months. And I'll also add organics at that time. Any kind of organics with the microbial life is fine, like your Dr. Earth or your Down Earth, one of those kinds that has the microbials. And then I also do a soil drench. A lot of people use Foliage Pro and they can foliar spray as well, or just water with it. I use jacks because I have a huge bag. I have 25, 5, 15, and I have not found any issues with over fertilizing. I watered 2 weeks straight with straight jacks, and that has not hurt the trees in any way. Citrus trees especially like nitrogen, so if you dump a lot of nitrogen, they'll just grow and then they'll flower, and for me it seems fine. I haven't had any problems. But generally, if you're gonna do a water fertilizer, just once every 2 weeks should be fine. It's different if they're outside or inside, but we'll get to that later. Watering is simple. With the mineral-based soil, you can just water as much as you want. The only thing you want to consider is that if you're watering excessively, you're gonna water out your fertilizer, the nutrients out of the soil. So you do want to manage that, not too much, not too little. Generally, I water every day. I water several times a day depending on how hot it is. Right now it's winter time. I have a drip system set up, and this waters every day for 5 minutes. What the goal is to keep the soil at an even moisture level consistently. That way there's no stresses to the plant, no dry or wet conditions. So this way you don't get fruit split. Irregular watering does cause that. When it's like under 80, I'll do it once a day. But once we get to the 90s or so, then I will start adding, I'll water twice a day, because the containers are limited in size and they can only hold so much moisture. But as temperatures rise, they use water exponentially. I don't have any science or charts, but like once we get past the 100, then we're looking at watering around 3 times a day. For sunlight, they can handle full sun. I usually give them as much as they can take, or as much as the sun can give in my yard. And I haven't had any issues with the plastic overheating and the roots burning or anything like that, or any kind of damage. I did have one citrus tree have a little bit of damage. It was an orange. That's at about 110 degrees Fahrenheit. So, but it's not something I'm concerned about myself here. Maybe if you're in a desert, it's a different situation. So in my area in California, it's really easy to grow plants, so I don't have to worry about frost. I can't remember the last time I had a frost. And the citrus can take the heat, so that's not something I'm worried about either. But most of you guys will probably need to bring in your plants during the extreme cold, during the winter time. And with that, you'll want to have supplemental light, or you'll want to protect your tree outside. So if you live in a part where it gets really cold, you need to research your varieties to see what does do well. I know there are some people that have more frost-hardy varieties, like G. He got a bunch of crazy citrus. But otherwise, you'll have to bring them in, or you have to protect them. And once you bring them in, you'll need supplemental light, and your watering needs will differ as well, because it's going to be very different outside than inside. That'll depend on what you need to do. I don't do that, so I don't really have tips on that. I don't like to talk about things that I don't do personally. In terms of containers, I usually buy trees in the 1 gallon or the 5 gallon size, whatever Home Depot had at the time or at the nursery. And I don't usually buy 15 gallons because they're just expensive. But I will start a tree typically in a 5 gallon, even if it's in a 1 gallon, because they do grow fairly quickly, and that'll last you for a year. And then a lot of people like to up pot slowly, so they'll go from like 5 to 7, 7 to 10, 10 to 15, like that, because each time you up pot, you get a flush of growth. For me, I haven't had issues with growth, and I just go straight from 5 to 15, so I don't have to deal with up potting so much, and because I don't want to carry so many different sizes of pots, because I just have, like 1s, 5s, 15s, and 25s. It makes it more simple. So if you're in a 5 gallon, that'll usually last you the whole year, and then you'll need to up pot around the end of the year, or at least during the winter. And then I will go into 15 gallon, and that's been good for 2 years. Some of these are looking like they do need to go up to 25, and that'll be the final spot that they will live in. In terms of material, I like black plastic. I have tried growing in the grow bags, and I've only had bad experiences. I haven't had one that thrived in a grow bag. I've grown about 3 or 4. But what happens is they just don't grow. They just kind of sit there, and that's it. And I don't know if it's because the roots are not getting warm enough, or if they're getting too cold during the winter. I'm not sure, but I have moved them from grow bags into plastic, and then they've exploded. So for me, I'm just gonna stick with plastic. When you can tell that you need to up pot is that your tree will start to decline, meaning you'll start seeing chlorosis. Maybe you'll get some leaf drop, but generally your trees just won't be happy in the pot, and they just won't really grow. And then once you move them into a bigger pot, then they just kind of explode. So it's fairly easy to tell. For me, when it comes to most trees, it's either an issue with the roots, that means it's outgrown the container, or it's a fertilization issue. So what I do is I'll dump some jacks into the container, and if that doesn't significantly help it, if it's still declining, then I will up pot. Or if I can tell if the container is feeling super dense, then there's no more room for the roots to grow. So once you get to a certain size, like I said, my ultimate size is 25. That is a big container and heavy to move around. So 15 is also a good size to end up in. But periodically, once that tree gets root bound, you're gonna have to take it out and you have to prune the roots back. Once the roots could fill up a container, the trees will slowly decline. And it's like the same concept as bonsai. When you prune the roots, you need to take a proportional amount off of the canopy. That'll keep you going for another couple of years, I'd say, or until it fills up the pot again. Another common mistake from backyard growers, which I am also guilty of, is letting your trees fruit too early and too much. So these trees are basically mature trees. Since they're grafted, they have mature wood on baby trees. So what happens is they'll fruit like a mature tree, but the tree can't handle it. If you let it fruit too much, you often end up with broken branches, which is a huge waste of time because you don't get the fruit and your tree suffers, and you basically wasted the whole season on that part. So definitely don't be greedy. You can always thin the fruit or just leave a couple, but it's best to wait a couple years for your tree to reach a certain size before you let it fruit heavily. Plus on a young tree, like the fruit is not gonna be very good. I can attest to that. You're not gonna get the potential of what the fruits taste like, so you might as well just wait anyway. So like I said earlier, citrus do show that their unhappiness very easily. You're gonna either have to up pot or fertilize. Once you start seeing it decline, it's also a good time after about 5 months or so to add more Osmoco Plus, because that stuff's gonna run out. The other issues you'll see is leaves curling, and that's either from cold damage or if the plant is not getting enough water. But if you're using a mineral-based soil, you just water as much as you can. You don't have to worry about balancing out the dryness. So that shouldn't be an issue. Cold, that's something you're gonna have to figure out. I don't deal with cold. I would say like mid-30s is a good time to consider protection. It depends on the variety. And regarding pests, there's not too much to worry about. You get leaf miners, which are mostly cosmetic. You get the bird poop caterpillar looking thing, that's the giant swallowtail, and they don't do too much damage on the leaves. If my tree is around the 15-gallon range, I'll just let them sit there, or I'll move them to my white sapote, which they also very much enjoy eating those leaves. But they don't do much damage anyway, so it's not like a tomato hornworm, which will just eat the whole plant and give you like mouse-sized dookies all over the plant. And the swallowtail is a beautiful butterfly, so I do appreciate them flying around the yard. We do have something called Huanglongbing HLB. It's from the citrus psyllid. It's a slow kind of virus that kills the citrus trees slowly. And I'm in the quarantine zone here, but that's not something I really worry about either. There's citrus trees in my area that are like 20 years old. There's one next door. It hasn't affected them. It's not as bad for us here in California as it is in Florida, but you might have to net your tree if you're in Florida or something like that. Aphids also do come around once in a while, and aphids are usually an ant problem because the ants will farm the aphids. So if I see aphids and I see ants, then I'll get rid of the ants with taro. It's like ant bait. I just put the trap in there and then they eat it, and then eventually the colony that they come from gets wiped out. If it's just aphids, then I'll just blast them off with water. That's enough to just get rid of them. And they usually don't come back after that. Aside from that, I don't have too much issues. It's just water, fertilize, and up pot. So I hope that helps. If you have any questions, drop them below. I will do my best to answer them. And definitely give it a try. If you're gonna grow a lemon, I just wanna let you know you only need one lemon. There's no need for multiple lemons, unless you want them, but one lemon tree is enough lemons for your family. Let's try one of these out. All right. This is a page mandarin. It's got a lot of seeds. Not bad. Right, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more.
Rose gone wild. That's what they call me. I'm the man with a plan, growing naturally. From the dirt to the table, it's a beautiful sight. Yeah, it grows gone wild. We're living it right.